10, still here, that's all me. Black love 2D. Damn.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Making Change from the Ground Up, Effective Advocacy for Local Change. My name is Sarah Red, and I am going to be providing just some monitoring support or moderating support for this session. And today we have Allison Coffman with Amplify, Georgia, and Asha Noorullah from the Athens Reproductive Justice Collective, who are going to just share all this incredible goodness about advocacy, local advocacy. So with that, I'll pass it over to Allison.
All right. Hello, everyone, again. So as we've been doing in all of our sessions, we encourage folks to say hi in the chat, share your name, share a little bit about like why you're joining the summit. And I would especially love to hear from folks about why they're interested in local advocacy. My name is Allison Coffman, Executive Director of the Amplify Georgia Collaborative. I'm joined by Asha Noorullah. I'll give Asha's formal introduction when I hand it over to Asha partway through the presentation. But we'll get into it because I feel like there's a lot to cover in just this 1 hour session. This session will be focused on local advocacy. And so I'm going to do a bit of an intro on kind of what does it mean to do local advocacy? What is the role of the local government in protecting and expanding reproductive justice? And then what are ways that we can advocate, right, for the changes we want to see locally? And then what we're going to do is get into some case studies so we can really make what we shared in theory more tangible, right? So Asha is going to be sharing more about the work that Asha's leading in Athens, both with URGE and the Athens Reproductive Justice Commission. And then to conclude, I'll share a little bit about our recent win to secure abortion funding here in Atlanta and how we made that possible. So I'm really excited to get into the real nitty gritty specifics of what it looks like to do the work locally, because it's fun and it's always interesting and spicy. So we'll share a little bit about that. And then we'd love for folks to capture in the chat any questions you have, or also share experiences you have advocating locally. It is always interesting to be doing this work, especially at the municipal and county level. And I'd love to hear what experiences folks are bringing into this room. So this first slide just captures some of the reasons why we do, why we work with local government, basically. So one big reason is accessibility, right? Proximity. We all have local governments and they are all very proximate to us, right? So the federal government is way over there in DC. Our state government is in the capital that we may or may not live in, but our local government is here. Our elected officials are our neighbors. We may run into them, whether or not they want us to. So they are more accessible. We can attend their meetings in person. Hypothetically, because of this accessibility, there is a higher likelihood of accountability. They also often usually have much fewer voters than folks at the federal elected officials at the federal level or at the state level. So we are more likely to be able to hold them accountable, and a smaller group of us can do that, right? Because saying I have 1,000 folks that signed a petition locally, that can make or break somebody's race in a way that maybe at the state or federal level, that number of folks wouldn't. Another important thing to note about local government is they're able to push change upward, right? So by experimenting, by implementing things at the local level, we're able to prove that something could be possible at the state level. In states like Georgia, the local governments may be more progressive than the state government. I think that is definitely the case for Atlanta, Savannah, Athens. So there's an opportunity to make changes that may not have been possible, that may not be currently possible at the state level because of who is holding power. The flip side can also be the case, right? And another important thing is that most local governments govern year round. So they are voting, they are meeting all year round, as opposed to here in Georgia, we have session for a fixed amount of time at the start of the year. And then often our elected officials are off either doing their other jobs or campaigning. And so there's a little bit of a start and go, and there's a limited period of time in which you can really push for policy change. And then the last piece is just, it can be a place for innovation. I wanted to have a slide about preemption because I feel like whenever I talk about local government, people bring up the preemption boogeyman, which is basically, well, can't the state step in and prevent the local government from making a change? The answer is yes. The state ultimately has like authority over local government. For example, the state, hypothetically, this happened in Texas, like the state could step in and say, you're not allowed to fund abortion care. And prevent local government from doing that. So there's always going to be a bit of a calculation around, okay, do we want to implement something that could then be preempted? But I also want to share that preemption is not a guarantee and that there is power still in implementing stuff, even temporarily, even if it is ultimately preempted. But that is something really important to consider, especially if you're planning for a shift in power at the state level, because then it may be a matter of timing, right? So that is something important to always be talking about, but not to allow it to paralyze us or prevent us from creating local change and innovation. So I was going to take a little bit of time to just go through I'm going to take a look at the chat real quick, make sure I'm not missing anything. Okay, if you have any questions, feel free to throw them in there. Otherwise, I'm going to get through these slides so we can start talking about the specifics. So this section focuses on what local government can do to advance reproductive justice. And these resources are from the National Institute of Reproductive Health, who has this really wonderful local reproductive freedom index that they put together every 2 years that basically grades various cities on an index that they score for various ways that cities can protect and expand abortion access or reproductive justice. And so the reason I like it is because it basically gives you a list of ideas of like what cities could be doing. And it includes cities and counties. And in Georgia, Atlanta is specifically the city that they score, but they also have a self-scoring index that they share with folks. So you can take it to your city and score your city yourself, and then bring it to your city council or bring it to your county commissioners and say, look, we got a 1.5 out of 5. Like we could be doing a lot better in this score. Or look, we got a 3.5 out of 5 and we're actually leading the way for the South. And that's really awesome. And like, how can we continue to do even better and like celebrate the successes that we've had thus far? So these are directly pulled from that resource, which we'll be sharing with you all, both during this presentation, but also at the end when we share our big resource drive. And then the other thing is just that often when we talk about abortion access in particular, we think about the federal government and the state government, but there's actually a lot that the local government can be doing. And it's really important for us to educate local elected officials so that they're aware of the responsibilities they have to protect and expand access. I'm not going to read through all of this, but like one piece is specifically abortion access. So they could be doing clinic safety ordinances, right? So think buffer zones or bubble zones or other kind of enforcing noise ordinances. They could be regulating anti-abortion clinics, also known as crisis pregnancy centers. They could be putting other protections around clinics and providers. And they could also, and this is really important and often overlooked, just be doing public education, like informing people of their rights and where they can access care. They could be funding reproductive health care. So we'll be talking about the Atlanta funded abortion fund, but they could also be funding doula services. They could be funding reproductive training for providers. They could be funding STI and STD testing and prevention. And they could be ensuring that to the extent possible that their local insurance coverages reproductive health care. Here in Georgia, I'm almost positive we are preempted from having local government. Well, we are prevented from having local governments fund cover abortion care in their insurance, but there are other ways they could support abortion access, like extended leave for people who need to travel out of state to access care. Supporting young people. So support pregnant and parenting young people, provide comprehensive sexuality education, and reproductive health care within schools. Supporting families. So there are, lactation policies, like having rooms for breastfeeding. Paid family leave is super important. And then other environmental protections for maternal and reproductive health care. And then building healthy and just communities includes various other topics like menstrual equity, shield laws for survivors of sexual assault, paid sick leave, and then again, like public awareness campaigns. And then proclaiming our values, right? So issuing resolutions that condemn harmful abortion bans or in support of like state level policies that are supportive of reproductive health care. And a really important piece of legislation I want to like highlight is anti-discrimination laws. So making sure that people cannot be discriminated against for housing or for employment due to their reproductive health decisions. Okay. So that was like a lot of the what can they do? And if you're feeling overwhelmed, that's good, because that means there's a lot they can do. And it's really important for us to remind them of that, because I am sick of hearing from local officials, especially city elected officials, of them telling us, well, health really isn't like in our purview. That's really the commission's work, or that's the Board of Public Health. It's like, no, like there's a lot that you can be doing to advance reproductive justice. And by the way, like here's a tool that lays out everything you could be doing. And here's a score of what y'all have been doing. So then the big question, the $1 million question is like, okay, so how do we get them to do this? Like, we know all this wonderful stuff they can be doing. And the answer is we organize and we advocate. I really love this image. The Midwest Academy Institute, who does like wonderful organizing trainings, shares this image as well. It shows the big fish like chasing all the little fish and the little fish fleeing. And then it shows the little fish organized coming after the big fish. And that is us coming after our local city councils and commissioners when we are organized and holding them accountable to expanding our reproductive freedoms. So you've already seen this if you were at our plenary, but it just shows that there's a lot of ways we can organize and a lot of tactics we can use. Specifically today, we're talking about advocacy and direct action. So this is text heavy, but I wanted to just lay out some steps to winning policy change. Again, there is an NIRH resource and various other resources that go more in depth into this. But I just wanted to note that there is a process for this. So the first thing is really doing a landscape analysis, making sure we are really tapped in and understand what the biggest problems are impacting our community, right? So this means having conversations, right? This means making sure we're organizing with the people most impacted and that they're really leading the conversations and identifying of the landscape of needs. The next piece is issue cutting. So, okay, given these problems, like what are possible solutions to addressing them? And then for the sake of this presentation, we're going to focus on policy solutions, but I do really want to name that not everything has a policy solution or needs a policy solution. There's a lot that we can do as community members directly through mutual aid and direct action that does not involve policy change. And then there are a lot of policies that just need to be enforced that aren't currently being enforced. But say there's a policy solution, the next step is to think about, okay, what policies relate to these most pressing challenges? What policies are most aligned to our values, right? So for example, when we talk about buffer zones that protect clinics, that can be challenging, right? Because who enforces buffer zones? The police. How does our community members feel about passing a policy that inherently is enforced by a body that we may be working to abolish? You know, so that would be a question we have. If we do not feel like it's something that is a body we want to be working and like propping up and engaging, then maybe that is not a policy that we want to work on advancing. Maybe it's another solution. Then we start thinking about, okay, what policies are most achievable? What do we think would be most effective in addressing the issue we've identified? And I don't know why it says policy of olives, but what policies have been successful in other similar municipalities and counties? So I always find it really helpful to look at what other cities have done. And then just like, since resolutions and ordinances are public, you can just go get it offline and copy and paste it and adapt it so that you don't have to start from nothing. You can start adapting existing policies and then have something like tangible to propose to the local elected officials. Then you do your power mapping, who's in power, who has the authority to pass this policy, who are allies, who may be on the fence, and who would oppose it. And then you start doing relationship building and engagement. And so that could look like one-on-ones. That could look like mobilizing folks to make calls, to email them. That could mean going and doing public comment and making sure they hear from community members that this is important to them, that you have a policy solution in mind. It could also be protests and rallies and petitions. It could also look like media engagement, like op-eds and interviews, sign drops. There are many different tactics we can do to make sure the will of the people is heard and our proposed solution is reaching the people that it needs to. And then I just wanted to share this chart from the Midwest Academy because what I just laid out was basically the makings of a campaign, right? So like we have identified our issue, the solution we have for the problem, and then we need to design our campaign so that we are all working together to that shared end and we have clear tactics defined to achieve that win. And so this is a table, I'm happy to share it with folks, happy to connect you to the Midwest Academy. We don't really have time to go into what it looks like to build this out, but I just want to note that once you have this laid out, it's pretty easy to start plugging people in and moving them towards that, that collective win you're working on. So I'm going to pause there for any questions that people have about local advocacy or kind of the tools that are in local government toolboxes before we get into the specific case studies. And if I missed questions, let me know because I wasn't able to track the chat. What do you suggest? So one question I see that's the most recent one is, what do you suggest to those of us who live in rural Georgia, where many of our local governments are completely MAGA indoctrinated and do not support any of these issues? That is a great question, JJ. First thing that comes to mind, of course, is this is why voting is so important and that we elected officials that are supportive of our issues. We had a whole session on that. But we have a reproductive justice voter guide and toolkit for how folks can work on identifying and vetting candidates and making sure that we're voting for those people that ultimately will support our issues. So that's one thing. I know that doesn't always mean the change is going to happen immediately. But if you do have any allies on the city council, it can still be helpful to start cultivating those relationships, right? And even working with them to introduce a policy or to do some programming that would that you're still able to implement, even if it's not going to get passed ultimately this year. But there are pieces that even MAGA supporting city council members may be able to get behind. So if you can find openings around menstrual equity or around mental health or maternal health, other things that are intersectional to or a part of the reproductive justice framework, I think that would be an important way to start so that you start getting some entry points, you start getting some buy-in, you start seeing the fruits of those policy changes, and then build from there. Curious, Asha, if you have any thoughts on that question about more restrictive cities or more regressive cities.
Yeah, I know we're focusing on policy, but I think what comes to mind is maybe finding members in your community that feel similar to you because, people may have ideological differences, but there's definitely going to be a need for care there that's probably pretty uniform across the South. And you may be surprised that other folks in your community are more interested in reproductive issues than they may be let on before. And maybe you'll find, friends in your community, and you can start on that really small community level of just, saying, hey, what do you think about this? And just putting your head together to kind of build within your community. And over time, that kind of networking, you can connect with other people and kind of work on those issues and hopefully find those areas in which policy can be enacted. It is hard because that's something that takes time, but I think even starting on the small level is really important.
Thank you. And I saw a comment from Noorullah as well that was just about this is the importance of power building, right? Because even if we have the numbers, even if the elected officials do not yet represent the majority's will, it doesn't even have to be the majority. It has to be the vocal, whoever, the people that are being heard, that ultimately we're going to be able to pressure them to create some change. And then hopefully over time, like we saw in Gwinnett, start replacing folks with people that actually do represent the will of the people. Okay. I'm just taking a look to see if there's one other question. Can meaningful change be made outside of policy organizing? As you mentioned, some non-policy organizing can be done like mutual aid. Regardless, do you see long-term change happening without policy in this landscape? I think it depends on who you ask, but I feel that long-term change can be made without policy, that there are changes we can make as a community to rebuild and rework systems. But where I sit on this personally is that it is the responsibility of the government to take care of its people. And the reason I engage in advocacy is because they are not fulfilling their mandate to the people. So it's whereas mutual aid can help people afford healthcare access, it really should be on the government to pay for healthcare access so our money or the community's money can be going to other places. Other folks may not agree with that stance, but for me, it's more about this is our taxpayer money, right? These are our elected officials, and it's important to me that they are representing my will and the community's will, and that where there is a disconnect, we're advocating for that change. But it's not the only mechanism for change. And I think that all of them need to be happening at once. Anything you'd like to add, Asha? I think that's the last question, unless I missed something. Okay.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I totally agree that change can be made through other avenues. And we kind of want to be doing all those things concurrently. But if policy feels maybe intimidating or out of reach or something, there's many different avenues. If that's education or mutual aid, anything you do is helpful, I think, in this realm.
Yeah, and advocacy is not for everyone, and so you do not need to feel like that's the only way you're able to contribute to the movement. I want to make sure you have plenty of time to share the work that you're doing in Athens, so I'm going to turn it over to you. And I'll share my screen. You can just let me know when to advance the slides. One moment.
Okay, well, I guess while you pull up the screen, I can just do a quick intro. My name is Asha Noorullah. I am a fifth-year environmental engineering major at UGA, so I live in Athens, Georgia, so I'm a student right now. I've been involved in the Athens Reproductive Justice Collective for about a year now. The main organization I was part of was URJ, which y'all probably have heard of. And we have many chapters across the country in Georgia, but I've been a part of the URJ UGA chapter now for 5 years. And that's really how I got into reproductive justice advocacy and really learned a lot of what I know today. And so ARJC is actually an organization that's been around. I think was officially created about 2 years ago now. And it's URJ is sort of a part of the collective. And I'm just going to read a little mission statement here to give y'all more of an idea of what we do and some of our values, which are very much aligned with other organizations that you heard from. So the Athens Reproductive Justice Collective is an Athens-based collective that strives to uphold the tenets of reproductive justice as defined by Sister Song, to maintain personal bodily autonomy, the right to have children, the right not to have children, the ability to parent those children in a safe, sustainable community. So we'd like to fulfill this mission through advocacy, education, community building, specifically in Athens. So I am the policy co-chair And Vidisha Kudumari is my other policy co-chair, and we just have a really great team who's doing Athens-specific issues. So you can go to the next slide, and I'll kind of overview a bit of what we've done here in the past year. So talking about the importance of local government in Athens. Local government has been really instrumental in the kinds of things we want to work on. So like Allison's mentioned, it provides a really more immediate and personal way to interact with the government, has a more immediate, or usually has a more immediate impact because you're working on that smaller scale and you're working directly with folks to enact that change. For us, this looks like mostly interacting with the commissioners from the city council. So one big thing we did this year is we had fellows who worked on policy proposals because we felt policy was something really important and we wanted to advance in our organization. So I've listed here some of the policies we worked on, or actually that the fellows put together themselves. So these were policy proposals they wrote up and that they presented to the commissioners themselves. And the two I've put in bold there at the top are the two that we kind of had the most work on since then, the things we were advanced the most that the commissioners felt like they could help us personally. And that was really great because we really had a chance to work with them directly, meet with them, get their feedback on how we could actually go about enacting this change. And that kind of support is really huge to be working on policy. We're very lucky that we have some supportive commissioners. Not every commissioner is going to be as supportive as others. And that's sort of part of the battle of doing that power mapping that Allison talked about, figuring out who's on your side with certain policies, who you can go to, who may need some convincing and things like that. And so we also set up an Athens Abortion Fund that is not through the government. This is sort of the ARJC unofficial Athens Abortion Fund. But that's something we really want to expand. We really are trying to model off of other cities like Atlanta and really expand that as that need is really prominent in this community. There is not a single abortion provider in Athens. We've also done a couple of marches and protests, and that's been
Is anyone else having audio issues? Asha, all of a sudden your audio cut out. It may be your headphones. It's kind of just like buzzing.
Can you all hear me okay now? Is it?
No, it's like, sounds like vibration. Just all of a sudden. You could refresh your page, or it could be your headphones, or whichever. Oh no. Thank you all for bearing with us. All right. Oh, you gotta unmute. Try unmuting yourself first. Oh wait. Let's see. It's kind of doing it again. It's like a robot music track. Yeah, it does sound like robot music. Oh yeah, try without headphones.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah, that's perfect.
Oh, okay. I'm so sorry.
You're fine. I mean, it happened mid-session. I don't know how you predict that. You're good.
Oh my goodness. Okay, well, if everybody's okay with it, I'll just go through this slide again so you can actually hear me.
We heard you up until the Athens Abortion Fund, and then it started doing
stuff. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, so I was just talking about the policy proposals, and then another thing we've been working on is just putting together our sort of unofficial Athens Abortion Fund, which is through ARJC, so it's not something that's for the city, but we really want to expand that as the need is going to be growing. There's no abortion provider in Athens, so any folks that are seeking care are going to have to travel, and that's just, as we know, an extra cost that is going to be really difficult on folks. We've also organized some marches and protests with the support of Commissioner Parker, who's just awesome and has spoken for us and really supported us in all our endeavors. I want to talk a little bit more about those two policy proposals I've put in bold at the top. So this was great to have some fellows come in and get new people learning about policy, because it's definitely daunting at first and can feel like a lot. So this was a policy one of the fellows came up with. Her name's Leah Chang, and she put together this policy about adding infant changing stations to public restrooms. So some of the work we've done on that since then has, after talking with the commissioners, is mapping bathrooms in Athens that are public restrooms and getting some data on them, seeing if there are infant changing stations, if there are other amenities there, and seeing where we might be able to update those public restrooms and provide that infant changing station for Athens residents. The Fairfield Parent and Child Carol Fund is something that it's a desk and basically crib combo that allows a parent to work while also being able to take care of their child. So this is something we were hoping to get funding for, to add to the new library that's being built in Athens. So we've spoken to the commissioners on that, and we're basically waiting on updates for the budget for that, those plans for the library. So those are some of the things we've been able to go forward on. And these other policies are being worked on. But since a lot of people are students, we've kind of had a little intermission here over the summer. But yeah, if we could go to the next slide, please. I want to talk a little bit about the importance of having a network in your community, because it's really, really important to doing this kind of work. There's a lot of like-minded organizations and a lot of really helpful commissioners who support us in the work we do. So I think it's really key to build relationships with local government and community leaders, because that's really how you get things done, is by organizing. So some of the things we've done that have been really helpful is set regular meetings with the commissioners. They can be busy and hard to pin down, but if you keep a sort of regular meeting relationship or schedule with them, it's really helpful. And finding folks who identify with your cause. For us, that looks like reaching out to students in the involvement fair, or tabling, or going to public meetings to kind of share issues, to see if other commissioners who might not have heard of us want to be involved in things we're working on. And also getting to know the commissioners and building relationships with the people you work with. So seeing them around town and, saying hey and getting in touch with them as people, that's incredibly important, just to talk to them and, build that from a relationship, because you're going to want to work together a lot. And like I mentioned, we work with a lot of other organizations who are, a lot of them are on campus. We also work with some off campus. So URGE is sort of part of the collective now, but there's Period at UJ who helps to provide period products and end period poverty in Athens Clark County. There's Women's Health Support and Awareness Project, Women's Student Organization, Sister Song, Dignity for Immigrants. We also work with Athens Mutual Aid. So having just a really wide variety of people working in different organizations with intersecting causes, it makes it that much easier when you're trying to organize an event to be able to reach out to people. And even if it's something as simple as, just getting waters or masks or whatever it is for your event, when there's someone who can step up and support you in your cause, it makes a huge difference. And if we go to the next slide, please. And I just want to talk a little bit about the kind of work or the kind of things we've seen since Roe has been overturned. And I like to think that this is in part because of organizations like the ARJC and just like the Athens residents really having their voice heard. Hopefully we're a part of that, bringing issues to the table. But there's a resolution to protect reproductive freedom that was passed in Athens just this month. And that was led by Commissioners Dinson, Houle, Myers, and Parker. So we've worked a lot with Commissioner Houle and Parker and really brought to them the issues that we feel are important for reproductive health. And this is really helpful to just, even though we talked to kind of about how that state law takes precedent, it's really important to have resolutions like this sort of outline where the community stands on issues like this and show that people in your local government care about reproductive health. This resolution passed unanimously, which I think says a lot, because not all of the commissioners are, say, as sympathetic to the issues we bring up to all the commissioners. So it's not important, but you can see that they really care about representing Athens residents' values. Also, the district attorney, Deborah Gonzalez, said she's not going to be spending any resources on prosecuting abortion, which is really huge to say that we're not going to be investing time in chasing people down for just trying to get the care they need. And I think as we go forward, just building and growing our network across Georgia so we can support those rural communities, support other surrounding communities, and connect with everybody is going to be a huge thing as we try to deal with all of the things that are in our way and just support each other generally, get the care and the help that everybody needs. And if anybody has any questions about the RJC or URGE and the organizations I mentioned, please let me know, because I'm really happy to share more. But that's sort of an overview of the things we've been working on and working towards. And I'll hand it back over to Allison.
Thanks. I am going to stay off camera for a moment because I have the baby. So thank you so much, Asha. It was wonderful to hear about the incredible work you all are doing and the recent wins. I'm always really inspired by how many different kinds of RJ issues you all are working on progressing with the commissioners. It's a good reminder of the opportunities we have to also support parenting people and do better about highlighting the connection that we have to abortion access. So one moment while I hand it over. There you go. Thanks, music bottle. All right, thanks for bearing with me. Okay, so now I'm going to share the case study from Atlanta. And then afterwards, we're going to have some time for folks to discuss and share any examples you have from your local cities or municipalities or counties. So the topic I'm specifically going to be focusing on for this case study is securing Atlanta's abortion funding for Atlantans, which we secured this past month, and talking a little bit about how we were able to achieve this win, which felt so ambitious and long-term just a couple of years ago. So first, we started off in 2018 when Amplify was formed and kind of looked at the various barriers to accessing abortion care. And as we've discussed throughout the day, a huge barrier to accessing care has been is cost, right? So people cannot afford the care, and that disproportionately impacts obviously poor people, but also Black and brown people, Indigenous people, rural people, other folks who may struggle to spend the money, but also secure transportation and childcare and, get time off of work to access care. All of these things compile to make abortion access inaccessible. So one of the solutions we identified, which is a policy solution, was to establish a city-funded abortion fund. We had examples of other cities like, oh my gosh, why am I blinking on the name? Austin in Texas that had done something similar. So we had an idea of what it could look like, right? But we weren't yet sure how to make it happen in Atlanta. So we really started with relationship building, right? Like we were talking about, and figuring out opportunities to slowly build up support for abortion access. I don't want to write off the fact that Atlanta is a very progressive city, right? That has many clinics. And we were very strategic in choosing Atlanta because we knew that at least in word, many of the city council members supported or said they were quote unquote pro-choice. And so it was really a matter of us holding them accountable to actually putting money towards, right, the values that they claim to have, which is much, much harder than just getting, a resolution passed in support of abortion access. So where we started was kind of using HB 41, a resolution against HB 41 that they put forward in 2019 as an opening point, because a lot of them were on record condemning this abortion ban and stating that they supported abortion access. So it's like, great, you support abortion access, so now what are you going to do about it? Around a similar time, NRH's scorecard for reproductive freedom and for cities' reproductive freedom came out, and we worked with them to launch their revised scorecard in Atlanta. So we held a press conference. They released their new scorecard results. We released the score of Atlanta, which is a 2.5 out of 5. And we invited Councilman Faroki, who is somebody we'd been building a relationship with, who was supportive of the work we were doing, to present at this press conference along with the NRH to media. And then lo and behold, at the press conference, he announced that he was going to create a reproductive justice commission, which is something that we had also been working with him to establish. So that very day, he introduced the RJ commission at the city council. And after being passed through committee, it was unanimously passed by the city council. Something I want to share about that is, like, it is not uncommon when you're doing local work for you to be working on something for a long time, and then all of a sudden it gets introduced, right? All of a sudden somebody decides to make it work or make it, put the policy forward. And sometimes it is not necessarily the policy as you would have written it, right? Maybe there are some challenges in there. Maybe they aren't using gender inclusive language. Maybe there are some other stigmatizing things or inaccuracies in the resolution. So again, that is the opportunity to work with your allies and work in the committee processes, right? So most of the times when policies are introduced for a full council, they go to committees, and then at those committee meetings, they can be amended. So that's exactly what we did with the RJ Commission resolution. We worked with various other city council members to make some changes to the language, who makes the appointments, the gender inclusivity, to make sure that the resolution felt right and would be impactful for our community. And then once that was implemented, we had a body of folks along with our organizations who could also champion this work, right? So that was the power of having the RJ Commission. It's a city endorsed group that can also now champion this work. We also introduced an Abortion Provider Appreciation Day resolution, which recognized March 10th. There's actually a whole toolkit that folks can use. It's a very light lift, but again, it's a way to get the city to take a stand, and also a great way to celebrate abortion providers and recognize the incredible work they do. And then at the anniversary, the 49th anniversary of Roe, we passed a resolution. We worked with them to pass a resolution in support of Roe. And that was important because it was after a whole new round of city council members were elected. And so that was the first time that these new city council members had taken a stand in support of abortion access. So then we had everyone on record on the city council newly in support of abortion access. And then we knew that there was a good chance that Roe would be overturned, and we planned strategically to have an abortion fund resolution ready for the case that happened. So basically, on the heels of that decision, having a resolution ready to introduce, have it written and prepared, have the sponsors identified, so that once the decision came down, we were able to introduce it, and the moment was right? People wanted to take action. The city council was ready. The mayor was ready to endorse it. And so we were able to implement that policy that had felt so distant and so ambitious just a few years prior because of the work leading up to that point. And then we were also successful. Actually, Liliana Bakhtiari introduced a decrim resolution, which was another component of that work. And so I wanted to show that roadmap to just give folks a sense of like the kind of momentum you can gain through long-term engagement and work with a city council or a commission. I also want to highlight one other thing is that like a big turning point, an important turning point was first securing support and allyship from Councilman Amir Faroqi. And then really importantly, having a champion like Councilperson Liliana Bakhtiari elected has been really a game changer because so that just like goes to show the importance of elections, right? And that having supporters and allies are important, and having a few key strong allies that are willing to just introduce the bill and like hustle and like make things happen is like also incredibly important because although we had a lot of supporters, you know, there was a lot of hesitancy around the funding piece, and it took Liliana to be like, look, we're going to do this and I'm going to introduce it and I'm going to like build relationships with my colleagues as well. And I'm going to help you all know who to also build relationships with. That really helped us to take it across the finish line. So that's the next step slide. So related to this work, before we get into questions and answers, I just wanted to share a little bit about like ways folks get involved in this work. One is that you can go to Amplify's website. I'll share the link in the chat and sign up to be a part of the Atlanta or DeKalb County campaigns, or you can go to Athens RJ Collective website and sign up to get involved with their work. Also on that form on Amplify's website, you can select, I'm interested in starting something new in my locality. So if we're not currently doing work where you are, we would be really excited to link up with you and explore what our supporting your work could look like where you live, or connecting you with folks we know that are already doing the work locally there. We'll also share NIRH's tools that I referenced throughout this presentation. They'll be in that drive that we're sharing at the end of the summit with all the other resources we've compiled for participants. And you can also feel free to reach out directly to me if you have any questions or want to find ways to collaborate. And I see a lot of wonderful links. Thank you so much, Sarah and others, for sharing these. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and just open the floor up for questions or comments. And if anybody, since we do have about 12 minutes, if anybody wants to like speak and not just type, let us know, put in the chat, speak, and we will invite you onto stage to speak. All right. So I see a question. Apologies if this has already been said, but did you all have a voice in who sits on the RJ Commission? Yeah, so that is took a lot of work. One of my learnings from passing this first RJ Commission is that I would change who makes appointments. So the way it is currently situated is the Atlanta City Council members in different blocks appoint the commissioners. The mayor had 2 appointments and the Fulton County Board of Health director had an appointment. I would, if we could, have some application-based appointments where like a community committee reviewed applications and approved folks so that people could apply to be on the commission. Another thing that we could do in the future is have trusted community partners make appointments. So like Sister Song could have had an appointment, or a university could have an appointment. But the way that we work to ensure that the commission was made up of like the right people, the people who are doing the work, and like represented the communities that are most impacted by this work, is we advocated with city council members. So we created a list of folks that we thought should be on the commission. We got their resumes and we pitched them to the city council members, and we did our best to match them with their constituents, with their districts, so that they could appoint people in their districts. And that was actually a pretty successful approach. Other questions? Allison, what are some specific examples of small wins in the process? So I shared some examples like the RJ Commission, the resolution in support of Roe, the resolution against HB 41. Those were some examples of some small wins that got us to the abortion funding piece. And I'd love to hear more about how to take action for accountability and moving forward, given what just happened with the ACDC. So for those who are outside of Atlanta who may have not heard, the Atlanta City Detention Center, how many years ago? Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms, I want to say a couple years ago, made the promise, the commitment to close the ACDC jail. And was seemingly taking steps to close that. There was a committee created for reimagining the ACDC jail. It was supposed to be turned over to the community, right? To be used as a space for community support and not to no longer be a jail. And the city is reneging on that promise. And last week made the decision to lease it to Fulton County to deal with overcrowding. No, it is overcrowded in Fulton County, but rather than releasing people who should no longer be detained by Fulton County, they decided to use this temporarily quote unquote solution, which is to lease ACDC to Fulton County. So it's staying as a jail and allowing them to continue to jail more people. So I think as RJ organizations, it is really important for us to make the connection around mass incarceration and the work that we're doing, right? So this is inherently about bodily autonomy, right? Putting people in cages is a violation of people's bodily autonomy. And I want to note that there are groups, I will call out Kristen Baker from Feminist Women's Health Center, that has been intentionally doing work in her position as an organizer at Feminist to also organize people around the ACDC close the jail work. So I would encourage you to follow her and follow Feminist for updates on how to work intersectionally in that area. And like there was something else. Oh, the other thing I just think is important to note is that we can both celebrate a win and thank our city council members for passing this abortion funding. And we can say, we do not support your decision to not close the jail. Those two things can live together. They are not in opposition to each other. We just have to be really deft in the way we do it and make sure that we're never hesitant to hold them accountable because we're scared that they're going to take away other support, because we can do both of those things at once. Can someone put their name in the chat? Yes, Kristen Baker. Kristen Baker. Okay. And we can use our relationships that we've established to create an abortion fund to also challenge them to do better when it comes to mass incarceration. No, the other person working on the internet. So it's Kristen Baker. Yeah. Or you can just follow Feminist Women's Health Center, because they have been lifting up a lot of those calls to action and making the connection. Other questions? I'm sorry, y'all, I don't know if Asha, if you've seen other questions or if that sparks any other thoughts from you.
I don't see any other questions, but yeah, I think it's important to just keep other intersectional issues in mind, which I think anybody who's concerned about RJ is doing, but it's really cool when you can connect with other people working on stuff and see a crossover in your work.
Have folks seen anything else in their cities that you want to lift up, or challenges you've experienced in trying to advocate for these things? We have about 5 more minutes. I'd love to hear if anything is coming to mind. Something else does anyone have any other examples? Yeah. Something else I'll share is that if you are looking to bring, let's say, a decriminalization bill to the city where you're at, or even an abortion fund, as I mentioned earlier, these policies are in the public record, but sometimes they can be hard to find. So you can use Amplify as a resource to get copies of example policies so that you can use those as templates. And if you ever want help walking through a policy or how to build out a policy, that's also something that we could support you with, because I would say by design, it's a little bit confusing. And you definitely don't need to feel like you don't need to be a lawyer or a legal expert to feel like you can help craft policy, because it really is supposed to be accessible to us. And all public meetings are also supposed to be, or all government meetings are supposed to be open to the public. So also never feel hesitant to attend a public meeting and to speak at them, because they are truly there for us. And one of the few mechanisms we have to like ensure that we are heard, especially when they're refusing to answer our phones and emails. Well, thank you all. I don't want to keep people longer than we need to. Let's see. Does anyone have advice for young advocates being taken seriously? I feel like I've been told to be quieter, or I'm not addressing things in the right way when I try and speak the truth. Asha, do you have any advice as a student organizing?
I think that's sometimes difficult, right? Because that's a hard thing. Is like you're a young person trying to do this work. But I think what helped me was maybe seeing other like young people, speak confidently about the things they care about. I mean, it's sort of a simple answer, but like building that confidence, whether it's like going to meetings with other people that like other friends, just having that community like is really helpful, because I was definitely a little bit like timid or shy, or would like doubt myself about not knowing everything when I kind of first started this work. And I think sometimes just having like one or two friends to support you maybe when you're speaking is good. And joining an organization is always nice, because like you can sort of use like that organization and those values to stand upon to express your point. But I think it's one of those things that like you have to just practice, and your voice matters as much as an older person's voice. Like I say, just keep going with everything you do, and just speak the truth and speak seriously about what you care about. And people who want to hear you and want to deal with these issues will definitely recognize your sincerity.
I agree. It's hard sometimes to stand in your power as a young person, but your perspective is just as valid. And if you feel like somebody is not taking you seriously because you are a young person, I think it's okay to name that. Like, I may be young, but, because sometimes I think it's like there's power in verbalizing and challenging the person directly in it, rather than just allowing those assumptions to stand. There's also a lot of issues with just respectability politics, and just people not taking people seriously because of the way they dress or the way they speak. The idea of tone policing, like these are things that we need to directly challenge in our activism. And those in power, or those who are perceived as more authoritative, need to use that relative power, right, to push back and to stand up in support of other folks. Yes. Classic move of silencing women. Yes. I mean, we had young folks coming and talking about the abortion fund who had been doing a sit-in outside of the Golden Dome, outside of the Capitol. And there was a lot of disrespect because they were young and they were talking about how they were brutalized, like how the police treated them. And I think like having side conversations and talking about the importance of hearing them and making sure they had private conversations and one-on-ones with people who would respect their stories was a way that I could use the connections I had to make sure their voices and stories weren't overlooked. All right. Well, we're at 4:15. Hey, Sarah. Okay. With that, we're going to close out our session. And I invite you all to please round out the day with us and come to our closing plenary where Quadril Jackson, the executive director of Feminist Women's Health Center, will be sharing some inspiring words. And importantly, we'll be leaving with some actions that we can take now to start getting moving in our communities to advance this work. So I will see you all there.
Thank you so much, Allison and Asha.
Thank you all.
Thanks, you all. Have a good day.